It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
You underestimate my power!
Don't try it!
Hi everybody. We saw in that scene there where Obi-Wan verbally declares victory over Anakin because he has the high ground, and then Anakin goes to great effort to leap over Obi-Wan to regain the high ground himself. And of course, it was a mistake. Obi-Wan cut him down in the process, but obviously these guys felt it's very important to have the high ground, a terrain feature in this fight. Terrain is obviously an important thing today, in modern combat, but in science fiction, could it really be that important? They have all this technology and technobabble and whatnot. Yes, it's very important. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a lot of real-life examples and a lot of science fiction examples and how the terrain and the scenario and the equipment available limits what you can or can't do. So let's go ahead and get to it. Since the introduction to this section, a gentleman wrote into me by the handle of Lord Reven. Most of you will recognize from the forums. And he had a couple of examples that relate specifically to terrain, and I felt obliged to include them here. He says that chess, while that has a lot of things that apply to real-life warfare with the combined arms tactics and things like that, there's one thing that's different, that you can see the entire chessboard. And in real life, due to terrain, that's not the case. That on the chessboard, you can see every piece the enemy has. The way they're moving it, you can figure out his strategy if you're smart enough. Where in real life, due to hills and fog and weather and camouflage, all these kind of things, that you can't always do that. And in some ways, it's more like poker. Because you can't see the hand in poker, and you can bluff the opponent, make them think you have something you don't have. Or conversely, you can make them make a rash decision and come in and you actually have a superior hand and they didn't know it. Of course, in science fiction, you have sensors and all this kind of stuff, or starships in orbit or satellites. But those things can be countered as well with ECM, sensor jamming, that kind of thing, or stealth technology, or cloaking devices. Or you can hide your equipment under the cover of the forest. Or you can hide in caves, or you can bury it in the sand, things like that, until you're ready to use it. And so even in the science fiction landscape, they don't always know what you have. You don't always know what the enemy has. So it's not like the chessboard where you can see everything that they have. So in some ways it is more like a poker hand where you have to kind of guess. But also he had a specific real-life example from the Winter War where Russia invaded Finland. And taken from Wikipedia, the Soviets possessed more than 3 times as many soldiers as the Finns, 30 times as many aircraft, and 100 times as many tanks. So they vastly outclassed the Finns, but the Finns used their terrain and their knowledge of it against the Russians, and they were able to hold out for something like 5 months against the Russians. The Russians lost a lot more people than they thought they would due to terrain advantages. Also in real life, you had Napoleon was probably the best general that ever lived, but he made a blunder. He invaded Russia, and he thought that he could get a quick victory, but it ended up being an extended war, at least a few months, and went on into the winter. And the Russians were willing to burn their crops to prevent the French from getting them, and they couldn't get supplies in from France due to the winter. So a lot of their people starved to death or froze to death just due to the terrain and environment. Germany in World War II did a similar thing. They invaded Russia and they were trying their whole blitzkrieg thing. They were going to try to get an easy, quick victory, but it lasted several months and went on into the winter. Cut off their supplies just due to the terrain and the winter, and it became a war of attrition. And the Russians had the home field advantage. The Germans had no supplies and lost a lot of their people just due to adverse conditions and terrain. So in both of those cases, Russia had the home field advantage, and due to their logistical ability all being right there, they had the advantage in both cases. But is that always the case? Because in science fiction, a lot of the times we're dealing with such great distances that one side cannot possibly invade the other, and it's a one-way affair. One side can invade the other, but they can't invade in return. So it's strictly offensive for one side and strictly defensive for the other in some cases. Well, while the home field side, obviously all of their logistical ability is right there handy. They know where everything's at, they know the terrain, and they can use those advantages. However, every time a battle takes place, they're going to lose some of those logistical abilities. They're going to lose factories. They're going to lose people. They're going to lose crops and things like that. Every time a battle takes place, it tears up their stuff, and it doesn't tear up any of the invading forces stuff they have back home.
What is it?
A chocolate cake.
Well?
It was taken from a captured American private. It's still fresh. If you look at the wrapping, General, you will see it comes from Boston.
And?
General, do you realize what this means? It means that the Americans have fuel and planes to fly cake across the Atlantic Ocean.
So it all comes down to logistics. Can the invading force supply their troops inside enemy territory? Can they run blockades and jump with fast ATL, things like that, to maintain the supply lines? If they can, then in an extended war of attrition, they have the advantage, because they can keep their people supplied, whereas the defending side is losing the ability to supply their people constantly due to damages from war. However, if they cannot supply their troops, then they're going to run out faster because they only have what they brought with them. So it all comes down to logistics. Can the invading force supply their troops, yes or no? Another real-life example is the United States versus North Vietnam and the Viet Cong. Obviously, terrain was a factor there. You had all these rolling hills and you had thick jungle terrain, so they had to bomb the jungle and use Agent Orange and things like that to defoliate the jungle to effectively fight. Also, the Vietnamese would use underwater bridges. They would tie rope bridges just under the surface of a river that they knew where they were and they could cross, but none of the American scouts could find them because it was hidden from view. So again, using terrain as an advantage to move their people and supplies from place to place, and the Americans couldn't figure out how they were doing it and couldn't figure out how to cut those supply lines.
It's an odd phenomenon, water on this planet. Sustains sub-zero temperatures, and yet remains semi-liquid.
I'm sorry, I don't see the significance of all this. We've known about these ice pools for some time.
The Daleks are vulnerable to extremely low temperatures, and they hardly function at all at sub-zero levels.
Hold on!
Well done. Well done, everybody. Now, come on, Karen. We've got work to do.
Loudhead, switch on your thermal liner.
Keep out of that angle of fire. They may still be dangerous. Right, now lift up the top section. Are they dead?
Yes, the shock of the sudden cold must have killed them straight away.
Here we see the Daleks are easily killed by cold weather and ice water. I wonder how they would have done at Hoth attacking the Rebel base, or in the original Battlestar Galactica in 1978 at Ice Planet Zero. And speaking of such, let's take a look at that.
Well, we can send out a small, highly specialized task force down to the surface, probe for some weakness in the defense, destroy the weapon. Colonel, program of computer research for qualified personnel, experienced in Arctic survival, expert in mountaineering, highly specialized in heavy demolition.
Yes, sir.
4 specialists and 3 support.
Lock it in.
Galactica to fleet. Flight order 5
Commander?
Tango X-ray. Maintain minimum distance. All communication channels clear for...
Starbuck, you and Boomer get them and take them to the briefing room.
Aye, Captain. Sir? Commander.
There must be some mistake. Most of these people are criminals. They're aboard the prison barge. Are you
You have your orders, Lieutenant.
Sensor readouts.
Aye, sir.
Reflection will adjust for magnetic distortion.
Engine systems still...
What's the matter? Something serious?
Oh, no. We're just handing the safety of the entire fleet over to a bunch of murderers and cutthroats.
Now, due to the scenario here, they couldn't attack from above, either with Galactica or with Vipers, because there was this big gun that was going to destroy them if they attacked from above. Now, I don't know if the Colonials had a standing ground army before the colonies fell, but if they did, they're all dead now, because the only people in the entire fleet that could accomplish this mission, due to the mountainous terrain and Arctic environment and everything, were these criminals. So they had to hand the safety of the entire fleet over to a small group of cutthroats and criminals because they didn't have anybody else who could do it. So for all their technology, they were very limited by the terrain.
This is their camp, this is ours. There are mountains to the east and west, which means they have to come through this ravine to get to us.
Then that's where we'll relocate the mines.
In this example from the Siege of AR-558 in Deep Space Nine, the Federation troops used a ravine very intelligently as a choke point to set up a minefield. They had reprogrammed some Jem'Hadar mines, and if the approach to their position was wide open from any angle, they couldn't do that effectively. But the Jem'Hadar had to pass through a ravine, and so they intelligently set up a minefield right there and used it to create effect. And the Jem'Hadar had to pass a second choke point, which was the entrance to the cave. The Federation troops didn't effectively defend that choke point. The Jem'Hadar made it through and actually engaged them in hand-to-hand combat. But using the two choke points to great advantage, they were able to overcome a greater numerical force. So a small group of people were able to defeat a larger group of people using the terrain to their advantage.
Hopelessly outnumbered here, Captain. With those disruptors versus our hand phasers.
We're stuck with it, Mr. Spock. We'll have to make do with what we've got.
Kelowitz, Lang, flank out. Lay down fire on coordinates Mr. Spock gave you. Even if you don't see them, keep your heads down.
Helpless down here. And the Enterprise?
Sulu's an experienced combat officer, Captain.
It's my ship, Mr. Spock. I should be there. We can't even get at them.
Nor can they at us at the moment. Not unless they move their original position. That intervening high ground.
You remember the layout of this place? The arsenal?
About 100 yards in that direction. But after an attack as thorough as this one...
I'll risk it.
In this battle from Arena, I've highlighted 8 different quotes where Captain Kirk and Spock agree that fighting this battle with their pistols is useless. First of all, the Gorn were a long way away. Depending on the time frame, they were anywhere from 3/4 of a mile to nearly a mile away, and there was some high ground in between them. And the Gorn were launching mortar rounds over that and shelling the base. But it doesn't matter how advanced the phaser pistols are. Any beam weapon is limited in its range to line of sight. For instance, let's talk about really long range. You cannot shoot with a beam weapon beyond the horizon because that's as far as you can see. Similarly, that's as far as a beam weapon can be effective. Anything past that, it's going to fly over it. The horizon is a terrain barrier to beam weapons. That is the absolute longest range you can use in ground combat with beams. In this case, there was high ground in between them. They can't shoot beyond the near side of the hill. They can't hit the Gorn on the far side. And it doesn't matter if we replace the phasers with blasters or Zats or a machine gun or even a tank cannon with a 3-mile range. Anything that shoots relatively straight is limited to the near side of the hill. So they couldn't hit the Gorn on the far side of the hill in any event. So Kirk recognized this and the futility of trying to fight with beam weapons. So he risked running out to the arsenal, coming out from cover, exposing himself to mortar rounds to find something better to fight with. Let's see what he came up with.
Hey, give me a hand with this grenade launcher.
Lang! Any word from the Enterprise?
Sulu's taking her out of orbit.
They got Lang, sir.
Did you see them?
No, sir.
An evaluation, Mr. Kelowitz. Where do you think they are?
If I were them, I'd go to the high ground on the right. I'd make it 1,200 yards, azimuth 87. It's pretty close for one of these little jewels, Captain.
It'll be a lot closer for them. Stand clear.
Kirk here.
Captain, the alien's withdrawing. She's at extreme range, but our sensors indicate she just activated her transporters.
Lock onto the alien, Mr. Sulu.
Kirk called this a grenade launcher, but we'll call it a mortar. That's just terminology, and that's the role that it serves as a mortar. One thing it didn't do was kill all the Gorn, because they beamed up to their ship, according to Sulu's report, and bugged out. But they bugged out because it leveled the playing field. And it didn't level the playing field because it's super advanced or super powerful, although it does appear very powerful. That's not the reason. It's because it's a mortar. Okay, and it doesn't matter if we replace that mortar with a World War I era mortar from 100 years ago that doesn't have a computer in sight. You may have to scratch out the math with your finger in the dirt. Even that could put the hurt on the Gorn, and they'd bug out. Because it's a mortar. Even though it's vastly inferior technology to the phaser, it's vastly superior tactically, especially in this type of situation. Because it's different technology, it has a different effect, does different things. And it's designed and built specifically for this type of situation, attacking an enemy on the opposite side of terrain features, like hills or buildings. It's designed and built specifically for that purpose. It's vastly superior, even though the technology is vastly inferior. It's like I said way back in the introduction, regardless of technology, if you don't have a mortar, you can't do the things a mortar does. Even if you have a really nice pistol. Let's see a different way to handle high ground. Now, when they call these things all-terrain vehicles, they really mean all-terrain. I mean, it's climbing up a vertical rock face. Try that on a vehicle with wheels or tracks. But wait a minute, the Republic has mortars, they have guided missiles, and they had a starship nearby in the atmosphere. So why didn't they use some of those things? Well, see, you have to consider the scenario as well as the terrain. This was a rescue operation. So blowing the base to bits wouldn't help. You have to go in with troops on the ground. With your infantry to perform a rescue op. So in this situation, you're limited by the terrain and the scenario. Fortunately, the Republic had equipment that could overcome that and climb up the side of the rock face and get the troops there.
I see the entry point.
You were right. The wind conditions are too strong for jetpacks.
Yes, we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way, with ascension cables and a steel grip.
I don't think so.
What do you mean?
Electromines. There's nowhere to put a grappling hook at that height. And we hit one of those, the mission's over. They'll know we're here.
I suppose that means we free climb it.
But in this case, the enemy was more well prepared, this being a permanent fortification, and the wind was too strong to use jetpacks, and they had added mines to the terrain features to prevent the use of cables. So our heroes had to just free climb it.
3, 2, 1. Mark! Turn them up!
Do you think being underwater is hostile terrain? Yeah. In fact, we rarely see underwater combat in all the groups that I cover. In modern day society, of course, we have submarines, or occasionally somebody will use scuba gear to go and maybe plant some demolition explosives or something to be detonated later, but that's about it. And most of the franchises that I cover, they avoid underwater combat altogether, almost. Only in Star Wars do we see where they are fully equipped to fight underwater. They have not just infantry, but they have vehicles and artillery, the whole 9 yards, because in that society they may have to fight anywhere. They can't just go where it's 75 and sunny with a cool breeze on dry land. They have to go everywhere, from hot environments, cold environments, underwater, and even in space.
We're losing the signal. The port can't take much more damage.
Sinker, your turn.
I'm on it, boss.
What the?
In laser clankers!
Warning. Decompression in 45 seconds.
And speaking of space, let's talk about terrain there. So was there terrain in space? Yeah. And let's see a few examples.
Hull temperature is critical. We can't withstand this heat much longer.
Program is online. Engaging metaphasic shield now.
Hull temperature dropping. Down to 7,000 degrees. Maintain course.
Borg ship has broken off pursuit.
Tier, activate maneuvering thrusters. I want you to drop us into closer orbit. How much closer? We're gonna dip inside the lower corona. We use those flares to take out the enemy missiles.
You've done this before, right? Right?
First time for everything.
Four, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The missiles have impacted on the solar flare. They missed us.
So here we have a couple examples where they use stars as terrain to defeat an enemy, and there are other examples as well. And the environment of planets could be considered terrain for a spaceship as well. Let's see a few examples of that.
First Officer's log, supplemental. The electromagnetic interference on the surface has been judged too dangerous for anyone to transport down. So we've taken a shuttle to investigate.
Shields are holding, sir. Wind shear is incredible.
Data, keep an eye on the stabilizers. If it's anything like this on the ground, I don't see how people can survive in this moon for very long.
Maybe they've been living underground.
The question is where? I still can't locate the source of the damn signal that's bouncing around more than we are.
Forward thrusters have failed, sir. We are losing power.
Enterprise!
Go ahead.
We've lost our thrusters attempting to compensate with secondary boosters.
Sir, the shuttlecraft's impulse generators have shut down.
Commander, can you hear me? There's a shuttle, please respond. Hold on. We're going down.
Initiating emergency landing procedure.
Maintain the approach attitude, Data. I'm taking her in. Brace for impact.
And here we have a similar thing in Star Wars where Han and Leia have stolen this Imperial shuttle. They're going to take cover at this planet here. The nav computer doesn't recognize that as a planet, I guess because it's not safe. Scanners say there's nothing here but an atmospheric sea of cyclones and electrical superstorms. He says exactly. You can't be serious. The Bucketheads stopped following us, didn't they? See, the TIE fighters turned away because they're not as stupid as you are. Would be torn apart. So here we have in both Star Trek and Star Wars a shuttle-sized vehicle when you enter a planet's atmosphere that has sufficiently intense storms, whether cyclones or electrical storms or whatever, it's dangerous for the shuttle. Taking refuge in an area where the enemy is not likely to follow you is one of Han's favorite things to do. Here we see another example in The Empire Strikes Back with the asteroid field.
Chewie, set 271.
What are you doing? You're not actually going into an asteroid field.
They'd be crazy to follow us, wouldn't they?
Shield generators somewhere in this area. They're slowly increasing the diameter and keeping it just ahead of their troops.
Heavy cannons are going to be useless against that.
As they get closer, I suppose we could try to draw them into the buildings. That might level the playing field a bit. If Rex and I can engage them here, you two might have a chance to get through their lines undetected here.
Urban warfare presents its own problems with that kind of terrain. There are a lot of hiding places. It's hard for heavy equipment like tanks and things of that nature to maneuver that well between the buildings. They're limited to just down the street. And obviously it's difficult to use your artillery and missiles, things of that nature, because you generate civilian casualties. And I also note that when the Daleks land on Earth, they almost invariably land in London, one of the largest cities. It's difficult to bring artillery and missiles and things to bear on them, because you generate civilian casualties. They use them as human shields. The modern military has changed the way they use APCs a little bit in the urban warfare environment, because they aren't as concerned about RPGs and tank warfare, things like that. They're mostly concerned with mines and things of that nature. So modern day APCs used in Afghanistan and Iraq, things like that, are called MRAP. And it looks kind of like a big Tonka truck. And it's just a tall truck that has a V-shaped hole underneath. And when you run over a mine or something, it's mounted high, and of course the V-shaped hole spreads the shrapnel and all away from the vehicle, rather than having a low tank-type vehicle like a Bradley or something like that. So does that continue into science fiction? Yes. Look how tall an AT-AT is. So obviously they're protected from mines, so that continues forward. Let's talk briefly about man-made barriers. We did talk about some fortifications earlier. Back in the Middle Ages, castles, they made their walls really tall because the main things they were defending from were arrows, and it was hard for someone to shoot their arrow up and over the wall. And of course the people defending the castle had the high ground, and it was very easy to shoot down on people below. And of course you could pour out hot grease or whatever on them, as we see in some older movies. But with the advent of the cannon, which could blast the walls down, and later on when people were building forts, they made them very short. They would mound dirt up around them, around the walls. That way if the cannonball came in on the proper trajectory, it would probably hit the mound of dirt rather than the fort's walls, and if it went too high, it would simply fly over the fort and miss. So if we compare APCs, for instance, they used to be short, now they're tall, whereas fortifications used to be tall, now they're short. So they kind of switched due to changing conditions. Now, is it better to be tall or better to be short? Well, that depends on the specific scenario and what you're facing. But anyway, as we've covered here, terrain certainly is a major factor, even in the science fiction landscape. No pun intended, whether it's in space with stars and asteroid fields and things of that nature, or on the ground with hills and valleys, like with the Jem'Hadar, they had to go through the choke point, things like that. It's always a factor, and it always will be, because warfare really hasn't changed that much, even in science fiction, which is part of the premise of what I'm talking about here. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this commentary, and I'll see you in the next one.